What if I told you that Greyhawk and Waterdeep were but two sides of the same coin? What if I told you that all the major campaigns and major public campaigns were not separate worlds, but facets of the same gem, part of the same world, but existing in different layers of different alternate realities? So what this means is that under the right circumstances, a character going into a cabin and going into Waterdeep suddenly found himself on the streets of Greyhawk. This will be a good concept if you like all these campaigns. I would like to somehow tie them together without going through a whole separate planet things. Just a different layer of the same planet, the same prime material plane. Again, I call for the visual of the gem with many facets. It's just one facet of the same gem. To make things more interesting, you could tailor their histories, make them somehow seem similar, parallel. A lot of them do seem parallel. There's typically, you can break things down into a golden age, where races grow and become powerful civilizations, often mastering great magics. And to tie with the medieval tone, all that knowledge is lost because those golden age civilizations, they all collapse. And those are mostly the ruins that characters will be exploring, and many of the secrets that were lost. Again, going back to the Dark Ages concept, that there was this great knowledge that was lost, that you're not living in the good old days. Those glory days are far gone. So all these settings have that. To go with this concept, it is interesting to have them have somewhat of a parallel history, certain parallels between the histories of each, and typically I just break them off into the classic Greek concept of ages, beginning with a golden age, a silver age, and a bronze age, and then an iron age. Golden age always being the age where there's an empire that arises, a great powerful civilization, and they also have equally powerful magics that they master. Essentially, they're rulers, they're masters of their world. But of course, that world comes collapsing, usually as a result of war or some other great calamity. In the case of Greyhawk, this would be the Age of Glory, and it comes, the age ends with the invoked devastation, the reign of colorless fire. In the case of the Forgotten Realms, it would be the great disastrous events that led to the formation of the great desert Anauroch. The great magical disaster. Incidentally, that would totally tie in with the concept of the Forgotten Realms as being realms that were forgotten, as if the other spheres once had knowledge of each other back in this age, when in the Golden Age, there was a lot of knowledge that was lost. And part of that knowledge, besides magical knowledge and other sorts of knowledge, is also knowledge of other spheres and other worlds out there. When that was lost, everything had a more isolated type of feel within each sphere. So this is the concept of the spheres, that each campaign setting is a sphere into itself, a realm, a facet of the same gem. So typically with the Golden Age, as I have it, these races are, because the old school concept is very human-centric, meaning that humans are like the dominant race, so everything comes from the human point of view. The Golden Age has a lot to do, at least in most campaign settings, has a lot to do with races that are what I will call the pre-humans. They're ancients that are almost godlike races in terms of the power that they amass and how they evolve into this high civilization. But ultimately, they're the ancestors of what will become modern humans in the campaign. So the Golden Age ends, knowledge is lost. A lot of magical knowledge is lost with that. And knowledge of other spheres is lost, eventually. This is followed by the Silver Age. And most of the settings, as I have it, the Silver Age marks the rise of the demi-humans. Elves and dwarves arise, and then the whole civilization builds up to a climax. And by some reason or other, those falls. And this leads to the Bronze Age. The Bronze Age is modern humans arising From the ashes of whoever was at the golden civilization, the pre-humans, they become more as men as we know them. They build their own empires and kingdoms arise once again from the ashes of the old. As the cycle takes its course and winds down, once again, the Bronze Age comes to an end and leads to the current age, which will be the Iron Age, which is the Dark Age, which is the collapse of the nations and kingdoms that existed before. The nobles are trying to fill in this power vacuum and to better themselves, and a lot of betrayal and backstabbing going on. And the typical things, war, plague, pestilence, famine, and all that stuff. So that marks the current age, which is the Dark Age. And that brings the campaign to current time. A notable exception to this is Middle Earth. If another spheres would be actual Middle Earth, well, the Golden Age would be much as Tolkien had put down, since Tolkien favored the elves a lot. So the Golden Age would actually be the elves instead of some sort of pre-human civilization. So this is a notable exception. So breaking things down into the 4 ages is one good way of doing that. Just summarizing things. There's no need to know minutiae of anything. But it helps a lot in terms of keeping the history organized and also easy to go back and read. As part of the streamlining process, just be able to quickly look back and read something on the fly. So how do you move between the spheres? How do you go from one to the other? Well, the most obvious example are like plane shifting spells and magic items and artifacts. Those will easily cross from one to the other. There are also certain locales that are what's known as a nexus, meaning it exists in 2 or even more spheres at the same time. Something like Stonehenge. Stonehenge will exist in several spheres, so you can pretty much, or the concept of the cottage, where you just walk into the cottage, being in Greyhawk, suddenly you come out and you realize you're in the Forgotten Realms. Spells like Dimension Door could also be able to cross, or blink, teleport. Also, if you roll for teleport and you get some sort of an error, you don't land where you intend to as a possibility, you just end up in another sphere entirely. Another example is the Silver Key of the Lovecraft stories. The Silver Key allowed you to navigate into your dreams, but in this concept, it should also be able to transport you to one of the spheres. So it's an interesting little concept. I mean, movies and books have had similar concepts out there. I don't think anyone perhaps has applied it quite like this to the campaigns, like Lincoln Forgotten Realms and Kryn Dragonlands, or also Dark Sun, having all be kind of part of the whole. Layers of the same collective world. If you want to throw something in dark, if you want to throw a dark tone over all this, versus say that they're home and having visited all these other places, what if something like that would begin to wear out their sanity, cause some sort of disorientation in their psyche? Not sure who they are, where their home is, or whether they belong. These are things essential to the human being. If someone would sphere hop excessively, with some confusion will actually start taking a toll on their sanity. I think that would be an interesting little concept to throw in. I think it's always good when you present something really wondrous as this thing about the spheres, visiting these other worlds and this and that. It's always kind of like a bit of a darkness to balance out the wonder, a horror to balance out the wonder. So that's always cool. So consider that. So I leave you with a quote from H.P. Lovecraft's famous short story Call of Cthulhu, and it says, "We live on a placid island of ignorance in the midst of black seas of infinity, and it was not meant that we should voyage far. But someday the piecing together of disassociated knowledge will open up such terrifying vistas of reality and of our frightful position therein, that we should either go mad from the revelation or flee from the deadly light into the peace and safety of a new dark age." H.P. Lovecraft, The Call of Cthulhu.